Even though it was designed by a Belgian, the 1895 Nagant was associated not only with Imperial Russia, but also the USSR.
In the 1890s, the Russians really moved forward in modernizing the arms for their army. And first thing they did was to develop the Mosin-Nagant Model 1891 battle rifle in 7.62 millimeter. The same firm of Nagant in Belgium then helps them develop a revolver. And in 1895, they adopt this Nagant revolver.
The Nagant's a cool revolver in the fact it was designed by a Belgian, Leon Nagant, who had designed revolvers and other firearms for dozens of years before he came up with the Model 95 for the Russians. And the idea is pretty neat. It's a 7.62 cartridge. It doesn't look like anything else. It kind of looks like a bottleneck wadcutter. And that's because the head of the cartridge is actually sunk into the casing, so that when you cock it, the cylinder actually rotates and then advances forward, so that there's no gas leak between the face of the cylinder and the breech of the barrel. Where if you look at any Colt, Remington, Smith & Wesson, you look at all these other revolvers, you can see a gap of light right there between the cylinder face and the back of the barrel. And when the bullet goes through there, that gas escapes. With the Nagant being able to literally force the round into a cone in the barrel so that there is no escape, then you pick up another 70 feet per second in speed, making that pistol round certainly one of the hottest rounds that were used during the First World War.
When you look at these early guns made by the Belgians, I've only seen a couple. They're really well done. I mean, typically there's not much finish left on them anymore because they've seen hard use. But in terms of the polish and the mechanics, they're very nice guns, fully in keeping with quality guns made for any military anywhere in the world at the time. But eventually the Russians decided that, yeah, we need to make these ourselves. So they bought the tooling from Nagant. It's shipped to Russia, to the Tula arsenal, and the Russians entered into production of the guns for themselves.
The Nagant revolver stands out in the pantheon of military service revolvers for a couple of reasons. One, it has a very, very odd mechanism in that it actually has a built-in gas seal. And this was paired with what was otherwise a very antiquated system. Despite having this novel gas sealing mechanism, it still loaded and unloaded like a traditional single action revolver. It had a loading gate on the right side of the frame that you had to open up, and then you had to manually remove cartridges and manually insert cartridges one at a time. So very cumbersome, very slow to load and unload. The other standout element of the Nagant revolver was that it had a horrifically heavy trigger pull. Trigger pulls ranged anywhere from about 12 pounds in single action mode to 20 pounds in double action. Despite some of these less desirable features, the Nagant saw an incredible service life through the First World War into the Second World War, and they ended up making more than 2 million of the guns.
The initial guns that were produced both at Nagant and at the Tula Arsenal were really, really fine guns. The finish was very good, quality was good. As time progressed, and they went through World War II, and this was still a very popular gun in World War II, they worked, but the fit and finish definitely diminished. And then lately, a lot of the guns that you've been seeing for sale were guns that were actually sold by the Russians, and they had been refurbished. The early guns, such as the one we're looking at here, was made in 1914, and it hasn't been fooled with, brings, several $100s.
The 1895 Nagant Revolver that we have in the collection was a gift to us from Colonel Lind, whose father was also a full colonel and had served in the Siberian expedition of 1918 and 1920. When the Russians decided to strike a treaty with the Germans in March of 1918, the Allies became quite concerned that there was a gigantic pile of supplies at the western port of Vladivostok and the north port of Archangel Murmansk, that if those supplies fell into the hands of the Bolsheviks or even the Germans, that the war could be, dragged on for quite a while. And so that's exactly what then Captain Lind's 31st Infantry did, was go to Vladivostok to protect American financial interests in all the military hardware we had left there. Anyway, he somehow got one of these Nagant revolvers and kept it for the rest of his life. And his son, who is now 92 years old, gave it to the museum. They shoot, from my personal experience, shoot pretty well, although currently trying to find 7.62 by 38R is a bit of a difficulty and expensive.